Hi there, and welcome to the Everyday Entrepreneur Podcast, where I, Kaitlin Fritz, help you reach your entrepreneurial potential. Together, we can build your dream social impact business so that you can leave a legacy beyond your 9-to-5. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Everyday Entrepreneurship. My name is Kaitlin, and I am so glad to have you joining in from wherever you are listening. Today, we're going to talk about that elephant in the room when it comes to building a social impact venture. No, it's not revenue or money, impact metrics, or grants and funding. We're ruling it back to basics. I'm talking about assumptions. For most founders, assumptions are like those skeletons in the closet, because every venture is based on some key assumptions that need to be tested. As an entrepreneur, you need to have some critical reflection on the assumptions in your business. And what I mean by an assumption is an element in your business that has not been evidenced. In the early days, that might feel like everything. But let's jump into an example before I give you some key takeaways on how you can analyze your assumptions. Let's roll it on back to Airbnb, back when it was Air, Bed, and Breakfast, that blue and pink logo. At the beginning stages, Airbnb was a booking platform for rooms, and they had a huge list of assumptions in their business. Let's think about it. People would be willing to pay to stay in strangers' houses. And strangers visiting new cities would rent rooms in other strangers' houses. The founders probably assumed that renting with a local would be significantly cheaper than staying at a hotel. And people would appreciate staying in a local home to experience the native culture. These were all assumptions at the early days. Because think about it, if people weren't willing to stay in strangers' houses, and if people did not want to put their hard-earned money, then their financial model would make absolutely no sense. If they didn't have users and suppliers, their entire marketplace would collapse. And cost is one of the earliest competitive advantages to convert users into their market. All of these now might seem like common sense because I'm pretty sure probably 90% of us have the Airbnb app on our phone. But everyone starts somewhere, and that's usually with assumptions. Let's take a look at your business. What are you assuming, guessing, hypothesizing? So if we use Airbnb as an example, let's flip the switch and take a look at analyzing the assumptions in your business. So ask yourself, what do you not have evidence for? What are you hypothesizing, assuming, guessing, and get honest. My first tip for you is to brainstorm all of your assumptions. Sit down with a blank piece of paper or the recording app on your phone and just rattle off every assumption you can think of. I'm assuming people will pay this much for my product. I'm assuming my target market is parents between the ages of 35 and 55. I'm assuming people want it to be a web app rather than a mobile app. Get honest with yourself and just brain dump. Do not criticize. Do not go back and make edits. Just get it down on paper. My second tip would be rank your top 6 assumptions. Look at that list or listen to your recording and ask yourself which one of these are business critical. Circle them. Write some bullet points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If this assumption turned out to be false, would it have a major impact on my business? For example, Airbnb assumed strangers would pay money to stay in other strangers' houses. If that turned out to be false, there would be no Airbnb today. And I like to rank them because in my head, that is the way I am going to go out and test. And that leads us to point number 3. Designing a way to test your assumptions and mitigate some of those risks. I love this phrase I learned where risk is something we can measure, uncertainty is something we can't. Assumptions fall in that bucket of uncertainty. We want to move it into that bucket of risk, so then we can test and mitigate. So then look at those lists of your top 6 assumptions. How can you go out and validate? What can you do to test if you are right? I designed a little worksheet for this, so if you're interested in mapping out your top 6 assumptions and ways to test, just DM me on Instagram with the word assumptions. Testing can be something as simple as having a conversation with your users, running a quick survey, all the way to designing a really early prototype to go out and see, or a pre-sale page to see if people will put their credit card details in. We're not talking about rocket science crazy tests. What we're doing is designing these incremental phases for you to validate these assumptions so that we can move those assumptions into truths. Because I want your business to be built on rock, not some sandy assumptions. And last but not least, this is kind of a tip/lesson. To truly understand if your assumption has been debunked, it's important to track the data. So you've gone out, you've tested, you've run a survey. After you do one of these mitigation tests, record it because patterns will be so critical in building your business. That way, you will know if you've proved or disproved that assumption. Now, I'm telling you this also from experience. As a business owner, I had tons of assumptions about what I thought my users would like, what I thought would appeal to them, and what I hypothesized would resonate with their pocketbooks. But oftentimes, like most entrepreneurs, I was wrong. I thought my really cool selling points that would resonate with them were actually secondary features. And what resonated with a user was a completely different element of my business. You don't know unless you try. So I encourage you today to stare down that elephant in the room. Look at some of your business assumptions, not with anxiety or fear, but with excitement, because now you are going to evidence and build those building blocks of success in your business. So once again, if you want this template on how you can design and test your assumptions, DM me assumptions on my Instagram and it will be sent right over in your DMs. And once again, thank you for listening in. It's wonderful to hear all the work you are doing in building your social impact venture. And as always, if you want more tips, tools, and resources, join the newsletter community. Until next time, this is Everyday Entrepreneurship. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Everyday Entrepreneurship. To stay tuned and most up to date, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow me, Kaitlin Fritz, on Instagram. And if you have any questions about building your business with impact, drop me an email with the link in the show notes. This podcast is produced by the great people at the Podcast Boutique. I look forward to catching up with you next week. See you then.